Hello, and welcome to another episode of Laying Down the Lore, a monthly podcast in which we aim to separate our ghouls from our goblins, our snotlings from our Skaven storm fiends, and our bloodthirsters from our bloodletters, and generally ask, what's up with this Warhammer stuff? My name is Ben Crone Barber, and I know fuck all about Warhammer. With me is my co-host, Christopher Crallin Allen.
Hi there.
Who also knows fuck all about Warhammer.
Very true.
And my dear brother Darren.
Hello.
Who knows so much about Warhammer, it's a wonder he has time to do anything else. After gathering online to slay some vermin in the name of Sigmar, this dichotomy between our levels of understanding became clear, and this series is an attempt to address that ignorance. Good to see you, fellas.
Hey, guys.
Hey, how are y'all?
Good. Did you notice the little modification that I made to the intro there?
Yeah, I'm concerned that it might register to our listeners that you might know a little bit more about Warhammer than you're letting on.
Possibly, but I will say that the fact that Bone Splitters and Bloodclaw Raiders are actually, Beastclaw Raiders, sorry, can't even say the names, are actually part of Age of Sigmar is not something I discovered myself. This was pointed out to me, and I think really just highlights the fact that I do know fuck all. So I'm quite happy with the realization and with the subsequent alteration to the intro. So there you go.
Every day's a school day.
I kind of enjoyed being a little bit superior to you in one aspect of our lives.
Oh dear. Oh, humanity. Chris.
Yes, mate.
What went down last month, mate?
We had a lovely breakdown of the old world and its cultures, and we focused on the core part of the Warhammer world, the main players, such as the Empire, which are a Germanic-based human culture, a weaving of magic, faith, weird science, and pseudo-feudalism. Fancy. That's a lot of words for this time of the morning. Bretonnia, copy and paste. I'm literally just reading WhatsApp here. Maybe I should give it a go. Fuck it, I started to carry on.
Just straight off the top of your head, mate. Straight off the top of your head. Does all of his own work, guys. All of his own work.
Does all of his own reading.
Oh, barely. Anyway,
Get all the giggles out.
And we had Bretonnia, which was very much, an alternative take on the legend of Arthur, King Arthur. The Mediterranean-style merchants and mercenaries of Tilia and Estilia, or Estilia? Estilia, isn't it? Tilia and Estilia, who are brother and sister, according to the lore. Is that right?
Which?
Tilia and Estilia were, according to ancient history, were like brothers and sisters or related or something like that.
Oh, so spectacularly wrong. What a great paraphrase of what we covered in amazing detail.
Christopher Allen, ladies and gentlemen, he knows fuck all.
Less than fuck all. I'm worse than useless. I mean, you tell me shit and then... Okay, so Tilia and Estilia, nothing to do with families or brothers and sisters whatsoever.
No.
Yep. And then the others, the Halfling Empire of the Moot.
The Moot?
The Moot, and the empires to the west, the Wastelands.
There's an empire to the west of the Wastelands? What?
Wait a minute.
Which map are you looking at?
Have you been drawing your own maps again? The Wasteland. It's to the west of the Empire, not to the west of the Wasteland.
Ah, okay, that's the other place. Right, got it. Okay.
This empire here is west of itself.
How does one be west of itself?
Have you ever had Maduri? Half a bottle of that and you'll be west of yourself.
I feel west of myself at the moment. Jesus. And we touched upon the dwarven holds in the World's Edge Mountains. And finally, the bit that I definitely know about, the zombie swamps between Estilia and Tilia, as we all know, who are not brother and sister, which is home of the Skaven capital, Skaven Blight. I think that summarised it up pretty well, myself.
I mean, we've skirted past the wood elves, but okay.
Well, it's not in WhatsApp, is it?
It is. Look 2 bubbles down.
Lauren Forest, nestled between Bretonnia and the Empire, home of the Wood Elves, is what I said.
I mean, skirting round the wood elves is generally a good idea, isn't it? That forest sounded fucked up. You don't want to go in there.
No, you absolutely don't.
That is true.
An arrow through a nostril, that'll clear your sinuses.
That'll ruin your day. Oh, man. I want my money back off this course. I'm learning nothing.
Oh, if we were charging, I'd be so much more professional.
Before we go on, I just want to ask you, do you remember this from a couple of episodes ago? So Skaven and Indiana Jones then have really got something in common, you know, that whole fear of snakes.
Tenuous link there. Yes.
I don't think anyone has ever made that connection, and I want to see you with your Skaven Blood Bowl team putting little fedora hats on them.
Yeah, and whips. Yes.
Whips.
Love it. Whips.
And then you've got to use your audio skills to create a rat squeaking version of the Indiana Jones theme song.
Hey, challenge accepted.
Oh, here it comes.
Oh no, you didn't, did you?
So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to present to you the Skaven Choir do Indiana Jones. I call it Vermin Deanna Jones.
Oh, mate, Disney are going to be all over your ass for that, man.
It was a well-spent hour, I'll be honest.
Mate, preset 24 on the Casio keyboard with a few garnishings of artificial rodent screaming behind it. Good effort, man. It was good.
Thanks,
It was
man.
good.
The Skaven Choir are available for hire, and they do requests. They do requests.
Do they do bar mitzvahs?
They do, yeah. They're available for all functions, regardless of race.
Excellent. Excellent.
That was amazing.
We've started strong, guys. We've started really strong. Like, I've made an ass hat of myself. Ben's proved his musical prowess. Darren,
Your turn.
you're up. You're up, mate.
I've effectively admitted to not being at all professional about this podcast.
So, Dhar, we're on part 2 of our geography lesson. I think we've made it up to the wastelands last episodes. Where are we going now? Where is our journey taking us?
Well, hopefully this will be a quick episode because all we need to do is the rest of the world. I'll give you a dealer's choice here. We can either head east into the Darklands and the Ogre Kingdoms, or south down through the kind of orc-riddled Badlands into the land of the dead, or west, head into Ulthuan and then the home of their dark elf kin, and then down onto Lustria. So east, south, or west, gents?
My guess is that Chris is going to want to go orc side. And as much as I would love to start with...
You can read me like a book. You really can, Ben.
It's the green tinge to your skin.
I'd like to go south.
I'm really looking forward to hearing about the elves, but I am willing to wait to savor it. So, yeah, let's go orcs.
If you're happy with that.
Where are they? South, did you say?
South, yes.
South.
So, moving south from the border princes, we come to the Badlands, which outside of the Darklands is the largest concentration of orcs and goblins in Warhammer. It has a geography that's quite hilly. It's got lots of what we would consider to be steppes and mountains. And right in the middle of it, you've got something charmingly called the Marshes of Madness. Really, it's where the preeminent psychiatrists of the Warhammer world meet. You really can't swing a dead Skaven for hitting an orc and or goblin.
Why would you want to swing a dead Skaven? Come on,
because that's really the only thing they're good for.
come on.
Ooh.
Enough of this. Enough of this.
I've had enough of your Skaven bashing.
Listen, we've got good terms with the Skaven choir. I don't want to ruin that relationship, all right?
Are you going to start wearing a t-shirt that says Skaven Lives Matter?
Oh, can you not see it? I'm already wearing it. Okay, so we're, for some reason, swinging dead Skaven. Go on.
So it is absolutely chock-a-blocker of greenskins. They're shoulder to shoulder, kissing distance.
Kissing distance. That's a very interesting phrase to use when talking about goblins. Maybe it's the Glasgow kissing distance.
Clonk.
Hey.
So you've got all kinds of tribes there. You've got regular goblins, night goblins, forest goblins. You've then got mostly regular, in quotes, orc tribes, but you do have the savage orc tribes as well, which are the orcs that just let themselves be bitten by snakes or just drink their venom. They go absolutely mental and enter battle in a full red or green-blooded frenzy.
That's so awesome.
These guys love ass spiders, don't they? These are the ass spider guys.
And if they haven't tried ass spiders, they really need to jump on board that bandwagon.
Literally, butt first.
Awesome. Just hardlining straight through the butt.
9 out of 10 Krellins approve.
It's amazing!
But the orcs really do have some of the best names for their tribes. You've got, like, in terms of goblins, you've got the Scabby Eyes tribe, the Teeth Snatchers tribe. For the orcs, then, you've got the Bloody Hand tribe, the Broken Tooth tribe, which I think might be at war with the Teeth Snatchers tribe. I'm not entirely sure. And then you've got down towards the south, where it borders the Land of the Dead, you've got the kind of savage orcs, and you're looking at things like the Top Knots tribe, or the Bone Noses tribe.
And I'm guessing it's very Ronseal. These tribes are exactly what they say on the tin. Like,
yeah, the Top Knot tribe is just a bunch of hipsters, isn't it?
Exactly. Drinking deconstructed coffees for £5.50 a cup.
I think I've seen quite a few of them around Shoreditch in London.
No, you're thinking of the man bun mercenaries that you can hire out of Lucini, which is what was founded by a pair of twins, Chris.
A pair of twins?
There's the confusion.
A pair of twins, so there were 4 of them.
Oh, yes, yeah. A set of twins, not a pair of twins.
Okay, cool.
Nice diversion, Chris. Like, you dodge that shit like the Matrix, mate.
Oh, mate, I am slippery. And the missing tooth goblins and the shattered teeth orcs or something reminds me of that scene from A Life of Brian. We're the People's Front of Judea. We're the Judeans People's Front.
Really, the Badlands is where a lot of the fallout from some of the greatest events in Warhammer history have happened. The Marshes of Madness, which are in the kind of center of the Badlands, that used to be the great vampire kingdom of Morcaine, led by a vampire called Usharan, who came out of the kingdom of the dead, Nehekara, deep down south from where they are now. And to the east of the Badlands, nestled in the middle of the World's Edge Mountains, is a giant inlet called the Sour Sea. And on the coast of that Sour Sea is the great warpstone repository of Cripple Peak, where an enormous warpstone meteorite crashed down into a mountain, cleft it in twain, I love that phrase, and kind of nestled there. But that's where Nagash ended up building his great fortress. The thing I would say about the Badlands is it's a land of monsters, of every kind of monster you can imagine populating the Warhammer world. At least one of them is in the Badlands. There's lots of...
Lobster claw, 6-titted demons?
I know of at least 3.
Okay.
No, I mean, there's tribes, in quotes, of giants. You've got wyverns, dragons, wyverns even, trolls, ogres. You name it, it's there. You don't want any part of it. But it's also really good it's there. Because on the southern border of the Badlands are these enormous idols that mark the end of the land that the orcs consider to be safe, because after that, you get into the land of the dead, which is the great...
It is interesting that none of us are big fans of any of the kind of
The
what are
Empire.
viewed as the standard kind of good races. We all seem to be fans of the darker ones.
If it wasn't the orcs, it would be the dwarves for me. The dwarves are cool. It's a close second by the dwarves. Yeah.
And if it wasn't the Skaven, it would be the elves for me. What about you, Dhar? What would be the equivalent?
Who's your number 2? Who's your silver medal?
If it wasn't for the undead and all their flavors, it would be chaos.
That's quite broad. You're leaving yourself quite open there, really.
Yeah.
Any particular... Oh, no, we've already done the brand of chaos, haven't we?
No, I think I'd said previously that when I was younger, it was definitely Slanesh, the god of sexy times. But
right.
now it's more a mix of Tzeentch and Nurgle, of manipulation and decay. And as a parent, I can relate to that quite profoundly.
Do the orcs deem the land of the undead unsafe? They're scared. They're fearful of the land of the undead then.
It's the land of the dead, not the undead.
The land of the dead.
Attaboy. I think they would become anxious. I think that's the most I've ever read in any book, that an orc was actually anxious of something. It seemed unnatural. They enjoy a good fight, and a good fight to them is someone who sort of looks like them anatomically, with lots of muscles, and the bigger the better. When you're dealing with
scream in pain when you whack them as well.
Yeah, so when you're dealing with an entire legion of undead that march quietly towards you and don't scream when you hit them, I suspect that would be unnerving to an orc.
Yeah.
I'm unnerved, so I don't blame them.
Yeah.
We arrive then in what is now the land of the dead, what used to be the greatest human empire, probably in the whole of Warhammer history, which is the great kingdom of Nehekara, which there's no equivocation. It's Egypt. It's effectively Egypt, or used to be. The events we mentioned a moment ago with the fall of Nagash, what Nagash was doing, he was the son of the ultimate pharaonic king of Nehekara, and revolted against the city-states that existed at that time. They overthrew him, and he fled to the Nagashizzar, which is his great fortress on the edge of the Sour Sea. And from there, he decided, well, you know what? Fuck you guys in the ear. I'm going to rule over a kingdom of the dead. So, using the warp stone that he harvested from Cripple Peak, he created this great work, this great spell. And what that did is it transformed every living thing in the entire kingdom of Nekara into a land of the dead. Everything died and then rose again.
Jesus.
Wow.
The moment that Alcadazar attacked, he was about to finish the spell, which would have bound everything that was undead to his will. But what happened is he died just before he said that. So the dead still exist and still walk.
But mindless.
Well, most of them are mindless, yes. But the leaders, the kings and the priests of old Nehekara as was, transformed into the tomb kings, into the kind of great undead legions, modeled very much on ancient Egyptian military. So you've got despotic tomb kings, who were the great pharaonic leaders of the city-states of old Nehekara, and you've got the lich priests, who were the high priests of the various animal-headed god cults, but also in charge of the kind of mummification rituals, that kind of thing. So if you can imagine, the land today looks very much like a desert with somewhat ruined cities based on the kind of old Egyptian architecture, but everything is covered in skulls, either carved or actual skulls from living beings.
Wow.
Gross.
Yeah.
And was that decor of skulls and bones, was that like an aftermarket thing after everyone died and go, let's grim this place up with some skulls and bones? Or did it just kind of evolve slowly? I can't see the dead having, a very proactive mind in that sense. You know what I mean? With that kind of thing in place.
Was that more the leaders?
I think it was more an effect of the Great Spell. I think what happened is it not only caused everything that was living to die, but it turned representations of everything that was living to the dead form of it.
Okay, all right.
Wow.
The place is just beset with these once great cities that have now just turned into necropolis or necropoli. So you've got at the very north of the Land of the Dead, you've got Numas, which was the Scarab city. You've got the amusingly named Qatar, which is a real country in our world, which is the Palace of Corpses. You go through the kind of the tail end of the World's Edge Mountains, through what's called the Charnel Valley. You get to Marak, which is the City of Decay, and then up at the kind of mouth of the Sour Sea, which is called the Straits of Nagash. You've got Lamia, which is called the Cursed City, and that's where the vampires were created.
Okay. Remind us then, the vampires, they live up in, where is it? Is it Bretonnia? There's a little...
Oh, in Slovenia, yes. One of the 6 types of vampire live up in that city.
Okay. Where are the rest at?
They're dotted all over, and one has been wiped out. So when Nagash fell, the Queen of Lamia, Neferata, managed to capture the books of Nagash, the 9 books of Nagash, and through analysing the text was able to come up with an Elixir of Life, a potion that over time turned her and her close compatriots into vampires. And ultimately they had to flee and dispersed all over the world. But yeah, that's where vampires come from.
Wow. So they had to keep drinking this elixir until it turned them. So what did it do? Because vampires are dead, aren't they? They're undead. So it had to slowly kill them and then brought them back to life again. How does that work?
I think what
also
happened...
Elixir of Life, bit of a misleading title. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, man.
I think it refers to the life that you took to be able to make the elixir.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain I could name that better.
Maybe they just couldn't fit it on the vial, though.
Yeah,
vial.
Elixir of Life, not. But they just couldn't fit the knot on it.
Disclaimer, not actually Elixir of Life.
I think they really didn't read the terms and conditions on Nagash's book.
Because they were scattered around, though, weren't they?
Yeah.
That's the thing. His shit just got scattered all over the place. What a mess.
Yeah, it's interesting that once Nagash had been chopped up into effectively bone dust, that bone dust magically floated through the air very slowly and over centuries came back into the Land of the Dead, into the enormous Black Pyramid of Nagash, where his body was reformed over hundreds of years, and he once again returned to plague the Warhammer world. And he's done that a few times now.
No. Sneaky bastard.
So you can't really get rid of Nagash.
I mean, the only thing he's got going against him is that every large-scale thing he's attempted has always gone wrong. He's a little bit the Dr. Evil of Warhammer World.
If it wasn't for these pesky kids... Almost pity the guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So much potential. He just slips at the last minute.
Well, he's always defeated by a great human hero. There's never been a time where at some crucial juncture a human hasn't come up and just, stabbed him.
Well, then his agenda is clear. He's just got to get rid of the human race, right? And they keep calling me Ganache.
Ganache. And what's worse...
Why did they call me by my real name?
Barry the Necromancer.
Hi, I'm Jemima, the Minor Mine Miner, patron saint of laying down the law and all other Warhammer podcasts, whether they're aware of it or not. When I'm not down a mine or pretending to be down a mine, I like to drop in on my followers and lend a hand where I can. I just wanted to thank you for supporting the guys with your listens. They may sound like a bunch of complete melons, but the work they're doing is actually pretty important. Like gods, we saints rely on the activities of humans to ensure our continued existence. If it weren't for the likes of these dingleberries, I'd be out of a job. And other than singing in a minor key, I'm not entirely certain what other lines of work are available for an underage mime artist with a serious penchant for mining. So for fuck's sake, keep listening. Catch you later, guys.
So as the Land of the Dead had a boundary of orc-made idols on its northern borders, on its southern and western borders, there are also great statues denoting the boundary of the kingdom. And to cross any of those boundaries is to give yourself a good old 66% chance of being dead.
Wow. Shit odds, really.
As in, is luck of the draw, or is in like there are enemies there that are going to cut you down, or is it literally like you cross the threshold, it's like you more than likely will die?
Oh yes, I think it's more than likely if you cross the threshold, there will be regiments of undead spearmen or skeleton spearmen, skeleton archers. You've got these enormous bone giants, which are effectively the bones of giants animated. And you've got tomb scorpions, which are these great machines built of stone and bone that hide under the sands and leap out and will impale you with their stingers.
And you've got all these massive forces, and yet your success rate is still 33%. Are you saying they miss 1 out of every 3 shot?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the country is vast, so maybe...
Yeah, okay. You can slip through, yeah.
I mean, a lot of the exploration, I think, has come in through the Great Mortis River, which is effectively the River Nile. So you can get right into the heart of the country without ever stepping foot on land or on sand.
Okay. And the undead don't do water. They're like the Tasmanian devil.
Don't swing that way, bruh. Ooh-wee. Not getting wet for nobody.
You've hit on a good point there, because in the Warhammer community, the Tomb Kings are known as the Dry Dead, and the vampires and the zombies of Sylvania are known as the Wet Dead.
Ah, that makes sense.
So do the Dry Dead, do they not like water at all? Is water their enemy?
No, they're just bone.
They're just super, super dry.
Yeah, they're just bone.
Yeah, okay.
There's no flesh on them at all.
Okay.
These idols that are set up along the borders of the Land of the Dead, and you're saying, like, don't go in there because you probably get a spear up your ass or an undead scorpion underground thing impaling you in the face. What about the other way around? Are those borders guarded by the races that live on them on the other side? So, between the Badlands and the Land of the Dead, are the Orcs and Goblins monitoring that border to be like, shit, they're coming this way, let's attack them? Or do the guys in the Land of the Dead, the undead, do they just stay in the Land of the Dead? Do they occasionally, branch out?
In general, the denizens of the Land of the Dead remain within the Land of the Dead. They're tied to that land. That does not mean there have not been incursions into other kingdoms, and indeed they have a navy as well. So there was a couple of instances of where Cetra brought his legions aboard ships and invaded the Old World a couple of times.
Cool.
The Orcs, again, even though the Orcs get anxiety from the undead of that region, the markers they've put there, really it's for them. I don't think they would monitor it at all. And if it turns up, they'll have a fight, but they won't really feel good about the fight.
It's a hollow victory.
Yeah, it's a hollow victory. I mean...
It's a hollow enemy.
Well, yeah, exactly. The undead are no pushover, but it would be really like, for some of the larger orc tribes, it would be like you or me punching a kid.
Yeah. Satisfying, but you don't want anyone to know you did it.
Yeah.
But that's the north. To the west, you've got the human kingdom of Araby, and I think that border is monitored more closely. Although, given the huge distances involved over enormous deserts, there's not really that much they can do about it other than warn the cities that are on the coast.
I love that name. Araby. What's the definition of Araby? A little bit Arab.
Yeah, it's an incredibly colonial view of that part of the world.
They're just a bit Araby.
Yes, yeah.
Stop being so Araby.
So as alluded to in a previous episode, this is very much a 1001 Nights version of the Arabian Peninsula tacked onto the land of the dead. It's very much the nomadic Tuareg tribes. You've got caliphs and sultans, very much the kind of Aladdin-esque idea of what that part of the world looked like at that time. But you have that mixed in with the kind of forces of Salahuddin from our own world. So very much that religious warfare tacked on, but not as much in Warhammer. There's really not that much to say about the nation of Araby, other than it's been the site of a few crusades by the great Bretonnian knights that have been joined by knights from Tilia and Estilia and some from the Empire. Really, it's a trading nation. It's a kind of powerhouse that trades artifacts that they're able to snatch out of the land of the dead, plus things that they make themselves by trading with other groups up and down the coast of the southern continent of Warhammer.
So is this one of the countries that they haven't, one of the kingdoms that they haven't really, well, it is a country, isn't it?
It is a country, yeah.
Yeah. This is one of the ones that Games Workshop haven't really developed.
Yeah, they have developed it a little bit, and you used to be able to get a couple of units, I think a couple, maybe one, that was included in the kind of mercenary dogs of war army lists. So you could hire riders or scouts from Araby. But really, it has the problem that some elements of Warhammer have, where it was written down in the 80s. And while perhaps valid in the fantasy setting, and even though I disagree with some of the characterizations, I don't think it should be edited. I think it should be remained as is. Yes, as I said, it's a colonial view of that part of the world.
So further development in that area could potentially offend some? Is that the concern?
No, I think anyone who gets offended at a fantasy setting needs to sit down and have a cup of coffee. No, I don't believe there's anything egregious in it. And even if there were, it's make-believe. But I think that a development of it would be interesting. I'd love to see how Games Workshop would handle it now.
Cool.
Amazing.
So that was the kingdom to the west of the Land of the Dead. Then if we look at the kingdom to the south of the Land of the Dead, which is encouragingly called the Southlands, what you're really looking at here is an Africanized version of Lustria, of South America. So it's thick jungles, you've got the kind of Mesoamerican stepped pyramid temple cities, and at the very bottom, you've got high elven fortresses. It's not really an area that's been explored or detailed outside of the Lizardmen army books. So there's several of the kind of step pyramid city complexes there, and the most famous, I think, being Zlatlan in the Southlands, but it's, wrapped up in what's called the jungle of the gods.
So when you say like stepped pyramids, do you mean Aztec sort of style stepped
Exactly
pyramids?
Right, yeah, the Mesoamerican kind of style of step pyramids.
So that's the Southern American aspect of it. You said it's kind of like a bit of a merge of African.
No, so the region of land that would be analogous to Africa in our world.
Oh, I see.
Has been overwritten by an extension of the Lizardmen forces from Lustria, which, if you recall, is this Aztec, Mayan, Inca-style culture. And that's a really good thing they expanded there, because it's... I don't know if we want to talk about it. Do you remember the picture of the pygmy miniatures I sent?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's where the pygmies lived, and I think we should just draw a veil because that's perhaps the least acceptable set of miniatures ever released.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, moving swiftly on.
So that's everything to the south. You've got, dotted islands around there, usually populated by high elves. So you've got the Fortress of the Dawn right down at it's not only at the bottom of the southern continent, but it's actually on top of the northerlymost point of what we would consider Antarctica, which is where they have their southern polar gate, where there's a realm of chaos entrance.
Okay, yeah. So what are the high elves doing down there?
The High Elves have kind of circumnavigated the globe, and every time they come to a significant pass or a significant chain of islands, they'll build an encampment there, which over time will turn into a tower and then into a city or fortress. And from there, they can kind of project their influence over the surrounding countryside. Yeah.
Right, okay. So you've got the polar gates of the southern and northern wastes. Is there one of them that's worse than the other? Like, is it more chaosy in the south than it is in the north, or vice versa?
They've only really...
Don't get penguins at the North Polar Gate, and you don't get polar bears at the South Polar Gate, I think, is the rule.
Chaos penguins.
Chaos penguins. I love it.
In Warhammer, they've only ever really detailed the northern Chaos Gate, because if you can imagine, the core of the setting is the Old World, and that's a lot nearer the north than it is the south. So they've really not developed any kind of information on the southerly Chaos Gate other than the fact that it exists.
Do you get to different realms of chaos, whether you go through the north or south? Are they just two doorways to the same realm?
Yeah, two doorways to the same realm is a good way of looking at it. I think that each god has their own kind of section of the Chaos realm, but all four added up don't equate to 100% of the Chaos realm. So there's lots of sub-realms and kind of petty dictatorships, that kind of idea. Queethel, if we recall, the demon prince Queethel, originally a Skaven then, he has his own little Chaos realm. Yeah.
Get out. Oh, yeah, I knew that. No, did I know that? Did you already tell us that? So what, different from the normal Chaos realm?
Different from like Khorne's empire or Slaaneish's empire. So he has his own little section of the Chaos realm.
Chaos Hamlet.
Yeah. Where he just...
a borough.
He sits with his hunched over in his throne with his great wings covering him, and he's holding this really aggressive looking sword.
Excellent. Is he a figure?
No. I don't think he's ever been made a figure, but you could take one of the Vermin Lords, which are these enormous Skaven demons. I think you could convert him into a Queethel quite easily.
Are you suggesting that I try that?
I think it's going to end up with you buying the bits and sending them to me.
Yup.
East of the Empire and east of the Badlands is the Great Darklands, which is just an industrialized, blasted plain of ash and dust and scourged earth, constantly buffeted by winds and storms. It's primarily known for being the home of enormous orc and goblin tribes. The only reason they haven't taken over the world is that the access they have to the old world is through heavily defended passes in the World's Edge Mountains, staffed or dwarfed exclusively by dwarfs.
So the dwarves are literally keeping, in the same way that the orcs are keeping the old worlds safe from the ravages of the undead, the dwarves are doing the same thing with the orcs.
Yes, but the dwarves are doing it consciously, where the orcs don't really understand the benefits of having them there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That is clever.
So it's got enormous orc fortresses running up and down the Darklands side of the World's Edge Mountains.
And is it just constant skirmish down that length?
Oh, I would go so far as say it's constant warfare between the orc tribes on the surface against the dwarfs and the Skaven war clans underneath the mountains trying to dig their way up into the dwarven holes to effectively devour them whole.
So it's the dwarfs versus the orcs and the Skaven?
Yeah, dwarves versus greenskin and Skaven.
Are the Skaven attacking the orcs then?
The Skaven are attacking everyone.
Everyone, okay.
So you've not only got the Skaven attacking up from their own under Empire, but you've also got the Night Goblin tribes, who are these subterranean troglodytic goblins that drive these weird creatures called squigs ahead of them. Now, a squig looks like a row of teeth, 2 legs, and an arsehole with a tail, and that just eats. All it does is eat, and it's a mushroom-based life form that hops along.
All right, Chris. It sounds familiar. You're a row of teeth and an asshole, and you love to eat.
And these squigs, do they make the holes and carve through the earth and rock through which the Skaven and Goblin come through? Or are they just they're not into rocks and earth?
No, I don't believe they're into rocks and stuff, but some of them are enormous. Some of them are larger than a house. So, could do. I've not read where they have done, but they could do.
Okay. Yeah, just trying to paint a picture of how these guys might, engage and stuff and tunnel through. So do they have, the Skaven are known for tunneling through stuff, as are the Dwarves. The Skaven, how do they do it? Is it manual labor, or do they have like big machines that can blast through that shit?
It's sheer volume of numbers.
Right, I see.
Most of the Skaven Under Empire is chiseled out rock by Skaven slaves, which are the lesser class of the Skaven race. They do have mining equipment produced by Clan Skyr, which is the kind of mad scientists of the Skaven race. So you've got kind of warp stone drills that just liquefy rocks in front of them. I think they're used more when on attack than just kind of general expansion, because they need to get somewhere quick to get the hordes up and
shock
running.
and awe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's really the World's Edge Mountain. It's constant warfare between various races. On the Dark Lands proper, it's such an enormous area that the whole of the Old World could fit inside it. And it's just covered in kind of nomadic war bands of orcs and goblins. Some Skaven, you've got Crookback Mountain, which is this enormous kind of wonky mountain in the southwest, and that's a huge concentration of Skaven there from where they strike out at the kind of local enemies. But the most unusual denizens of the Darklands are the Chaos Dwarfs, who live on the factory-covered plain of Dhar. And with, I think I'd mentioned previously, they have been reinvented from just being kind of evil mutant dwarfs to being these comically large hat-wearing evil Babylonian dwarfs.
Wow.
They have a real dark empire. It's purely focused on the construction of equipment and weapons and armor for their races, but they don't just dabble in kind of industry. They also dabble in kind of mild eugenics. So they decided they needed stronger laborers, because what they do is they enslave huge orc and goblin tribes, hobgoblin tribes, which live next to them in the Mountains of Morn. But they decided they need a stronger slave, so they were the race that created Black Orcs, which are the Ironjaws in Age of Sigmar, Chris. So you'll be familiar with them there.
Cool.
These enormous, hulking orc warriors. And regrettably, they made them too strong. So eventually they revolted.
So what is a black orc? Is that like a chaos orc?
No. If you think of it as, you've watched Lord of the Rings, so it's a difference between an ordinary orc and an urukai.
Okay.
So that's really the kind of seed that the ideas for these guys came from. So it's regular Warhammer orc, and then super powered, super strong black orcs.
And you say that the Chaos Dwarfs were responsible for creating them?
Yes, they bred them, yeah.
What, using eugenics?
Using eugenics and the dark magic and the power of their priesthood, the demon smiths that worship their god Hashut, which we mentioned previously.
Oh, yeah. So just a quick question, 2 quick questions. You said the Old World, and I know we spoke a lot about that, but just to clarify, the Old World is essentially the Empire, Bretonnia, Tilia, Estilia, Laser, Blazer, Phaser, and Kislev?
And Kislev and the border princes down at the bottom.
And that all can fit within the Darklands. That's
quite easily,
Quite easily, okay. And the other question then was hobgoblins. You mentioned hobgoblins. What's the difference between a goblin and a hobgoblin? Is one of them kind of nutty and covered in chocolate?
And don't fall in your cup of tea after you've dunked it 3 times.
Yeah, and drinks half your fucking brew.
For anyone who's listening that isn't a resident in the UK, you should fall to your knees and weep on the understanding that you'll never know the joy of tasting a chocolate hobnob.
It is the most absorbent biscuit. You dip that in your tea and half your brew just disappears.
It's robust as well.
But then the upside is you have a biscuit full of half a cup of tea.
The ultimate upside is if you use enough of them, you end up drinking granola.
Porridge.
Porridge.
So anyway, what is the difference between a hobgoblin?
Yeah, so effectively a hobgoblin, they're their own distinct race, but they're effectively a halfway point between a goblin and an orc. If you beefed up a goblin a little and stretched them up to the size of an orc, that's a hobgoblin. And hobgoblins...
A skinny orc or a chunky goblin?
Well, I think that will be the eternal question, right up there with Vikings or pirates.
Pretty much, yeah, exactly. Definitely not clowns.
No. Clowns can get one. So the Darklands is such an enormous place that it's got sublands within it, little kind of areas that are the size of Bretonnia. So you've got the Howling Wastes to the east. You've got the Plain of Bones, in which is the ruins of Vorag, the fortress of Vorag, who was this vampire count that escaped from Nagash's control. You've got the Wolflands. Guess what they have?
Badgers.
Bunnies.
All riding wolves.
Oh my god, a wolf riding badger. That sounds terrifying.
So one of the most important things to keep in mind about the Darklands is it's constantly being traversed by human trade caravans. That is, trade caravans staffed by humans. And it's trade between Cathay and Ind, which are these regions that have yet to be really properly defined, and the Old World and Araby. So
it's like the old spice road.
Yeah, exactly right.
Old.
The old Silk Roads, the spice roads. Exactly, that's it. And those roads pass through the next region we're looking at, which are the Mountains of Morn. And those are the Ogre Kingdoms, where the revamped ogres, which are now based on the kind of Mongol hordes of our own world, live in the Mountains of Morn, which are in fact where giants originally came from. The sky giants lived in the Mountains of Morn with these great enormous cities carved out of mountains.
So would it be fair to parallel the Mountains of Morn like Russia, north and eastern Russia?
I think a more mountainous Mongolia.
Okay, so just on the northwestern area of China kind of thing, going into the Kazakhstans, the Uzbekistans, the Mongolia.
Exactly right. Yeah, the next kingdoms east of the Ogre Kingdoms really are Ind and Cathay, so it's India and China,
Right.
Gotcha.
Okay. Size-wise, how big is an ogre compared to a giant?
An ogre is about 10 feet tall. A giant is at least 25 to 30 feet tall.
Wow, okay.
So quite a big difference then. If the giants originated from the Mountains of Morn with an N or Morn?
Morn, yeah.
Morn. Are the ogres descendants?
No. I believe they're a separate race. And quite amusingly, one of the myths is they were created as a kind of twinned race, the other twin being the halflings. So the ogres will eat anything at all. Rocks, lava, mountains, people, other things that are not people.
The goats of Warhammer.
The goats of Warhammer. But halflings love to cook. So there was a theory that the halfling race was created to constantly feed the ogres larger and larger dishes.
Clever.
Wow. Yet it seems a bit of a futile exercise when you could just feed them anything at all anyway.
Absolutely.
Just show them a bloody hill and be like, eat that. Why do you need me to cook a nice rack of lamb when you're going to eat that?
Like, I'm full. I've just eaten that mountain.
Oh, this food is getting me hungry.
You shouldn't have bothered.
So the ogres really don't travel too much outside of the Ogre Kingdoms. There have been a few ogre hordes with a D that have kind of fought their way across the world. Really, the most interaction comes from these trade caravans paying off the various tribes as they travel through their lands. And these tribes consist largely of ogre bulls, which is the name given to a kind of adult ogre. But also they have iron guts, which are these great armor-clad warriors. They've got Mournfang cavalry, which are these enormous kind of crosses between a Highland cow and a bear, with a bit of cat, maybe, that ogres ride through the mountains.
Oh, Jeff, we've missed you.
But they've also then got the larger beasts and monsters that people will see, the stone horns and so forth. And the largest tribe of ogres is run by Greasus Goldtooth, who is so morbidly obese from all the eating and all the tributes that are paid to him that he has to be carried around constantly by effectively a whole tribe of these tiny little greenskins called Noblars.
Sounds like Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah, Loblars.
Yeah, if you think of Jabba the Hutt with a jaunty crown.
Okay.
Loblaw. So it sounds like the lawyer out of Arrested Development, Rob Loblaw.
Blah, blah, blah.
Rob Loblaw. Do you suffer from frequent disappearance of the spinal cord? Do your hands and feet occasionally swap places? And is there annoying pain in your anal cavity, like small poisonous spiders have been feeding on it? If so, they probably have, and you're likely suffering from ass spider syndrome, or ASS for short. This is the result of long-term ass spider abuse. Side effects can include inverted kneecaps, whispering teeth, and cranial fecal excretions, also known as anus ear. If these sound familiar, fret not. Help is at hand. Introducing Arachnicate. Arachnicate uses a special formula produced by, believe it or not, milking spiders. This silky milk not only soothes anal cavities, heals cracks and stops bleeding, but it also reduces the number of multicolored unicorns in your peripheral vision to the normal amount. So if you're tired of backwards nipples, colon rash, bipolar bladder, and rapid disintegration of the space between your toes, ask your doctor today about Arachnicate and start taking back control. Evacuate, eradicate, Arachnicate.
All rights reserved. Terms and conditions apply. May cause bloated bones, boring thoughts, head bunions, itchy kidneys, toenail pneumonia, and aggressive localized obesity.
So really, again, as we mentioned with the World's Edge Mountains, the Mountains of Mourne, there's a lot of skirmishes going on, but it's underneath the mountains that's where the real interesting stuff happens, because you have what I consider to be exiled ogres that have been kicked out of their tribes, thrown down mountain passes, and left to starve, left to fend for themselves. And these are the ogre gorgers. It's a horrific concept for a monster. It was just an insane ogre that's hungry all the time and will eat anything, won't stop to really have a discussion, and is really only impressed by something that can knock it on its ass.
Wow. Can I ask how an ogre would have been exiled from its own tribe?
Sodomy.
Yeah, sure. Cool.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That'll do it.
That will do it.
Each ogre tribe is led by a tyrant. That's the actual name of them, and they're also tyrants. And they'll set up their own kind of system of mores and manners. So if you...
And etiquettes.
Yeah, if you cross that, or if you challenge a tyrant and fail, you'll be left alive and thrown down to either be eaten by other gorgers or to become a gorger yourself.
Shit.
Wow.
That's upsetting.
That's a pretty bum deal, isn't it, on all rounds?
Yeah, so the rules on exile really are taken on a tribe-by-tribe basis.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that's really it for the kind of defined world heading east. I mean, we do have the nation of Ind, the hinterlands of Kush, We have Cathay, which I think we mentioned either last podcast or the podcast before, that Games Workshop was now starting to develop that so that they can bring it into Total War Warhammer, the computer game. But that, as yet, there's no information on that at this time. And also then you've got the island kingdom of Nippon. But that's really it in terms of definition. The Mountains of Morn and the Ogre Kingdoms, that's where the kind of known world ends. So after that is Here Be Dragons.
Here Be Dragons.
To be continued.
Okay.
So we return to the old world again as our kind of central point, and we head west. And the first thing we bump into is the circular nation of Ulthuan, the original home of the Elven race and the now home of the High Elves. Ulthuan looks like a big giant donut kingdom.
Huh.
Yummy.
Donut.
In the middle of which is the Isle of the Dead. And that's where, if you recall from our first episode, that's where the Vortex is based, draining the chaos out of the Warhammer world through the Isle of the Dead.
I have been playing Total War Warhammer 2.
Oh, fantastic.
And I think
Vortex, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, at least the starting region that you start the game on, you kick the game off from, is in this donut kind of isle, and then you've got this maelstrom type thing in the middle, sucking the life out of something, and some quest to kind of shut that down or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, but I recognise the circular nation of.
It's not like you to not pay attention, Chris.
What? Who are you?
So the island kingdom of Ulthuan, it's really split into two parts, the outer kingdom and the inner kingdom. And dividing that, running entirely around the island, is the Anuli Mountains, which are these effectively impassable mountain ranges, except for 5 or 6 gates through which elves trade and travel and shift forces around. So the outer kingdoms are protected by these shifting isles, which, guess what they do?
They stay completely still.
The whole island is surrounded by, a magical mist to protect it from invasion. It's got islands that seem to move and will crush ships, but also it's got kind of dangerous waterways, sharp coral patches, that kind of thing.
Jaggy bits.
And so, as one would imagine, the side facing the old world has the majority of this protection because you've got invasions from Norska, you've got traders and pirates coming in from the old world, you've got forces of greenskins, the most famous invasion being led by the amazingly named Grom the Paunch, who invaded and decimated one of the kingdoms in Ulthuan.
Wow.
On the side facing away from the old world, on the side facing Naggaroth and Lustria, you have really the kind of darker nature of elves on display. It's a war-torn side of Ulthuan, mostly because it's under constant attack by the Dark Elves, trying to get to the Shrine of Cain, which is on an island in the north of Ulthuan called the Blighted Isle, upon which sits the Plane of Bones. And on that plane, you have the spirits of High Elf and Dark Elf constantly warring. So you walk through the ghosts of every war they've pretty much ever fought. And as I say, in the middle of that is the Shrine of Cain, upon which sits the Sword of Cain, the one that Anarion pulled to be able to save the Elven race and damned his entire line with that curse.
And what do the Dark Elves want with it?
The Dark Elves want to wipe out the High Elves. They want to conquer Ulthuan. Really, they think that their king, Malekith, is the rightful king of all elves, and because they were repelled and their entire section, Naggaroth, was destroyed by an alliance of high elf nations. They fled to a place that they built their own kingdom, the kingdom of the Dark Elves, Naggaroth, which really, if you think about where it is and what it looks like, is evil Canada.
Evil Canada.
That is,
No such thing.
yeah, that is just incredibly difficult to picture.
Incredibly difficult.
Here, high elves, a boot.
No,
Stuff
a boat.
like that.
It's a boot.
A boot.
So the outside of the outer ring of Ulthuan looks like a very picturesque, but starkly so. A lot of barren plains from the side facing Naggaroth. But then on the side facing the Old World, you've got say for instance, the Kingdom of Cathay, and that has huge plains, lots of arable land, very beautiful looking, very kind of epic.
Very luscious.
Yeah, the whole thing is epic in the terms of, the standard fantasy tropes of elves.
Got it.
Right.
So on the inner ring, the inner kingdoms surrounding the Isle of the Dead, which sits in the middle of the inner sea, you've got these almost heavenly kingdoms that capture all the best aspects of the High Elves. So you've got Averlorn, which are the High Elves version of Wood Elves live there, but that's where the Everqueen lives, and she is the kind of ceremonial spouse of the Phoenix King, who lives in the city of Lothern, which is at the mouth of the entrance from the outer kingdoms to the inner kingdoms.
It's on the south of those donut isles,
Yes,
isn't it?
absolutely, at the very bottom.
Yeah.
But also,
that the capital,
it is also the capital. Yeah, Lothern is the capital. Within the inner sea, you also then have the two really important kingdoms. One being Sapphire, which is where all the high elf mages train, and it's where they've got this enormous tower, the Tower of Winds, the White Tower, and that's where the sword masters train, which are these elves that use two-handed swords that they wield like they weigh nothing.
I think I've seen those miniatures.
Yeah, they're the protectors of all high elf mages. Just on the other side of Lothern, then you've got Calador, which is where the dragon princes live. So you've got all these slumbering dragons in enormous caves. So really, the great power of the elves in times past were these flights of dragons that could come out of Calador that would, blacken the sun as they attack ships that are raiding them.
What kind of numbers are we talking about? Like how many dragons? 10, 12 dragons?
No, there'll be hundreds of dragons still left. There used to be thousands. So we mentioned Lothern as the capital of Ulthuan. That's at the very southerly point of the continent. And here is the only place where outsiders are really welcome, where foreigners are really welcome. But it's being welcomed by high elves is really like being condescended to by anyone else. So it's a bitter pill. As a point, I should say that the outer kingdoms are visited by other races quite frequently, most in an unfriendly fashion. But the inner kingdoms have never been set foot on by anyone who wasn't an elf. So
Wow, they're quite self-righteous, aren't they, and pompous.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
quite protected, aren't they, like geographically?
Yes, very much so. The Anuli Mountains, because of the vortex, the mountains are constantly awash with the winds of magic. So unless you're traveling through these protected gates and pathways, you're going to be attacked by huge monsters warped by chaos.
So what, are you saying that the vortex, because it's in the center of the island, is actually drawing all of that in towards it?
Yes.
So these lands are awash with a lot of chaos energy?
The mountains are, yes.
Mountains are, right.
I think there may occasionally be a bit of a wind of magic-based problem on some of the kingdoms, but it's not really noted anywhere.
Right, okay.
So in Lothern, you access the capital through 3 enormous gates. And the first gate is known as the Emerald Gate, and that is a set of gates made of bronze set with huge emeralds. And once through there, that's really where the foreign trade happens. That's where other kingdoms deal with the High Elves.
That's the marketplace of Lothern. That's where
Yes, exactly.
the wheeler dealing, the boot sales,
So then you go through another set of gates called the Sapphire Gates, and these are huge gates made of silver set with sapphires. And through there, it's really by invitation only if you're not an elf. And in fact, even if you are an elf, and not a resident of either Lothern or Ulthuan in general. And so in there, that's really Lothern proper. And in this enormous bay at anchor are huge high elf trade ships, merchant ships. You've got the war fleet of Lothern is anchored there. And that's where, as a foreigner, if you were invited in, you would see the true glory of the high elves writ large.
Is there any imagery of that?
I'll try and dig some out. Yeah, I think so. I'll try and dig some out.
Nice.
The final set of gates are the ruby gates. And these are gates made of solid gold with enormous rubies on them. And through there, you then get into the inner sea and the inner kingdoms of Ulthuan. And no foreigner has ever made it past there. And all three of these gates are as heavily defended as is possible.
So don't go through that gate.
Don't go through that gate. Or in fact, don't be anything but a high elf trying to get in. So the kingdom, the elven kingdom of Naggaroth, or the Shadowlands really, is in the northwestern section of Ulthuan. And when the Great Schism happened, known as the Sundering, that was the site where Malekith, who had been corrupted by his mother, and Marathi was the wife of the High King Anarion, who lifted the sword and damned his bloodline. That was the site of the rebellion against the high elf way of life. So what ended up happening was there was so much magic being thrown around so close to the chaos vortex that it literally ripped the cities of what would become the Dark Elves from the land. Their forces were destroyed, their principalities were flooded, and there's an incredible piece of art, which I'll dig out, which highlights the epic nature of this conflagration and flooding. Interestingly, the fortresses and cities that were torn from the land were able to float through the use of high elf and now dark elf magic. And what they did was they sailed those over to a land that came to be known as Naggaroth, the Land of Chills, which is analogous to Canada and North America in our own world.
Okay.
So these cities used to be on Ulthuan.
Yes.
And they just basically pick them up and fuck them over the sea.
They got torn apart by immense magics during the battle between Malekith,
yeah.
Old Mali and
Mali.
the High Elves. And was that one of those battles that was forever, I guess, recreated on that plane where all High Elf and Dark Elf battles are always kind of played over and over and over again?
Yes, okay. I think it was so large that it was reflected in the Blighted Isle. I should say that those fortresses and towers and cities, perhaps, that they managed to sail, in quotes, across the sea into Naggaroth, they formed the core of the cities, the Dark Elf cities. They expanded then, of course, from there.
Right, okay. As a nation then, the Dark Elves pretty big.
It's huge, yeah. I'd say it's on a par with the outer ring of Ulthuan. So it's the size of Ulthuan, roughly.
And I mean, in terms of numbers, do they equal the High Elves?
Not originally. I think it's come to equal that, but they're a very Darwinist...
They had a very rigorous bonking session to kind of get numbers up. Like.
Baby boom.
It's a very Darwinist culture. It's really only the strong survive. So concepts like compassion and love are crushed as soon as a Dark Elf child is born. And they're raised to hate High Elves with a passion.
We've all been there.
Do they not hate other empirical nations or kind of allied nations? Are they all right with the humans, or are they a bit like orcs? They only care about themselves. What's their attitude?
Well, they think of themselves as the true elven nation. So if we can imagine how arrogant and condescending High Elves are, if you think of the same with Dark Elves, but the Dark Elves will stab anything, including other Dark Elves, at a moment's notice if they can gain more power from that.
They sound very orcish, just with a bit more class.
They've certainly earned the name Dark, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, orcs really are kind of mindless violence. The Dark Elves really are considered violence. and they will...
Their hate more than anything.
Yes, more than anything else, yeah.
Scheming hate.
Okay. The orcs are just violent, brutish, and angry. Whereas, the Dark Elves have just got this festering, burning hate and want revenge and
Revenge.
justice. What they probably see as self-righteous justice for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, they're an entire nation that is geared towards invading Ulthuan and taking over. That's really what their primary focus is, or the focus of their leadership. They expand and invade and gain territory and gain resources purely with the idea that they're feeding it all towards being able to retake Ulthuan and sacrifice every single high elf on an altar to Cain, the god of blood and murder.
I mean, it's good to have a purpose, isn't it? I mean, it sounds like a kind of
get up in the morning.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a simpler life. You know, it's I having that singular purpose would be. I quite admire that. You know, I get pulled in about 50 different directions when I get a day off. I never know what to do with myself. But if my only purpose was to wake up and plot to overthrow a nation, sounds great.
I'd be a happier man.
I would be a happier man. I'd give it a spin.
So in terms of where they're situated, as mentioned, it's analogous to our own North America and Canada. To their north are the Chaos Wastelands, the true Chaos Wastelands. And they defend themselves by a huge range of watchtowers spread throughout the northern border. And these are on, of course...
just to clarify, you're now talking the borders of the Dark Elves realm and the Chaos realms, or not Ulthuan, but Naggaroth.
Yes.
And...
Yeah, Ulthuan's an island. It doesn't have a border.
You know that we live on an island and we have an organization called the Border Patrol.
There you go.
I'll get my coat.
So if we head back to Naggaroth, the land of chill, it has a shared border with the Chaos Wastelands, and it's defended by a range of enormous watchtowers, which, amusingly, that's where ambitious Dark Elf lords are sent when they overextend their reach. Their betters send them off as punishment to exile into these towers, where they're effectively expected to die defending people that can't stand them.
Bum deal.
Sounds a bit like the Night's Watch in Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
Kinda. Yeah.
It's very much that. But think spikier armor.
I was.
Less fur and more jagged pauldrons.
Jagged Pauldrons was the name I used to dance under.
How many aliases did you used to dance under, Darren?
He used to do a lot of dancing, that's true.
And the way I danced meant I had to move around and change my identity quite a lot. So Naggaroth is defined by this enormous inland sea. In fact, it's two inland sea. The areas are so large. You're looking at, when you come in, the first internal sea is the Sea of Chill. And towering over that sea is Carond Car, which is this enormous city, which is known as the City of Despair. And that's where all the slavers, the Dark Elf slavers, deposit their catches. And from there, they're sold to the other Dark Elf cities and estates.
Which is really ironic when you think about how many relaxation spas are dotted around the coast of the Sea of Chill.
The Sea of Chill. And because there's so many slaves in Carond Car, it's also the home to enormous flocks of harpies. Again, they look very much like the harpies of Greek myth, except they live atop the towers of Carond Car and swoop down and snatch up slaves and the occasional Dark Elf when they can.
Shit on your head when you least expect it.
Shit, that sounds awful.
Yeah, as soon as you arrive in Carond Car, your life is over, and there's a lot to be said for the fact that your life was over the moment you were captured by the Dark Elves. You're going to be worked to death in mines. Handsome and beautiful-looking slaves will work as servants in the towers of great lords and ladies, and a suitable fighter would be allowed to fight in the Great Arena, which is just down the coast from Naggaroth, which is the capital of Naggaroth. So moving in from Caron Car and the Sea of Chill, we come to this very large body of water called the Sea of Malice. And that's dominated really by two vast cities. One, the first you'll encounter, is called Harganeth, and that's where the witch elves and the cults of Cain reside. And so this is a city of murder that
Moida.
thousands of slaves a day are sacrificed to the god Cain. At nighttime, gangs of witch elves and perhaps executioners as well will roam the streets looking for any open doors or any traveller or dark elf out after dark. It's also the city where they train their assassins, and the assassins of the Dark Elves are arguably the best assassins in the Warhammer world.
It sounds both very cool and exhausting to live there. I mean, you, every second of the day, your life is on the line. Yeah. Why would one live there? Apart from if you're going to be trained to be an assassin, and I guess you're a follower of Cain. But even then, it's like, yeah, man. In fact, the whole of the Warhammer world is a pretty hostile place. Is there a balance at all? So you've got all these horrible places like the city you just mentioned, city of like the assassins in training and the cults of Cain and things like that. Yeah. Is there somewhere that is lovely? It's like Shangri-La, you know what I mean? It's like ambrosia and nectar.
In Naggaroth?
Not in Naggaroth, anywhere in this world of Warhammer. Is there a bit of balance?
I think Ulthuan sounds like if you're a high elf, Ulthuan probably is pretty nice place.
Yeah, but they've got it's a nice place, but they're snobby. Do you know what I mean? Is there a place where it's just like everyone's welcome?
I think perhaps, and I'm going out on a limb here, the only place that is like that is the Moot, because it's the Halfling Kingdom.
Okay, yeah.
And even then, guests and fish start to smell after 3 days. So there's nowhere you can relax for a long time. So I suspect the answer is actually no.
Yeah, that's sad.
Well, travel agents must have a fucking mission here.
Yeah, man.
So moving west from Harganeth, we get to the capital, Naggaroth, and this really is the seat of power of Malekith, the king of the Dark Elves, and where he lives with his mother/lover, Marathi.
What?
Incest.
His mother lover? You son of a mother lover. Hold on, that's me.
Well, I suspect after 7,000 years, your relationships might change.
That is one fucked up relationship.
That is just wrong. Okay.
So Naggaroth really is the ultimate seat of power in the Dark Elf Kingdom. It's where all the movers and or shakers live, and where you need to go to petition Malekith for any great feat that you're about to try. You mentioned there, Chris, that it doesn't sound like a terribly good place to live, and that's on purpose. Malekith does this deliberately. He wants to create a race of warriors, a race of the strong, because he believes that they failed in their original attempt to take over Ulthuan because they were weak, because they ran. And so he's creating a race of psychologically brutal, unyielding warriors so that they can conquer Ulthuan and slaughter every single person there.
Wow.
Or die trying. Okay.
So running under the mountains on the western side of Naggaroth are these enormous caves and caverns, almost an entire continent underneath the surface continent. And in there dwell effectively dinosaurs, really angry dinosaurs.
Say what now?
Yeah, called the Cold Ones. And these are these dragon-esque steeds that the Dark Elves tame and ride them into battle. It should be noted that they're great beastmasters. The Dark Elves excel at capturing all kinds of different and kind of wildly varied monsters.
Like really angry badgers.
Really angry. But I think you have a thing for badgers.
I don't have a thing for badgers.
You wouldn't tell, would you?
You mention every episode.
I mean, I'd be very wary of having anything to do with an angry badger, to be honest. Unless, of course, you were a dark elf and you were able to tame it. And then it might not be such an angry badger.
Well, I think that's going to be a great euphemism we can start using in our private lives. And yeah, she really tamed my badger.
I was a real angry badger before I got this one.
Given that they're such great beastmasters, it's unsurprising to discover that some of their larger vessels, some of the larger ships, aren't wind-powered. They are, in fact, pulled along by sea serpents and enormous sea lizards.
Nice. That's very cool.
So you not only have to contend with these kind of rapid-fire bolt throwers that they've got on all the decks of their ships, but then you may also get nom-nommed by some angry dragons.
Some nom-nommed. Wow.
Well, shit.
Yeah. So moving south then from Naggaroth, we come to Lustria, our final stop on this tour of the Warhammer world. And Lustria is the great continent empire of the Lizardmen. If you recall, the Slan, which you guys kept calling the Flange, Lizardmen, the Saurus warriors, the Skink priests, the Kroxagore, effectively Lizardmen ogres. And so this is the great nation, the first nation on the planet of Warhammer that mirrors, certainly in aesthetics, the Mesoamerican, the Incan, Aztec, Mayan civilizations of our own world. And it really is a kingdom that spans from what would in our world be the north of Mexico straight down to the tip of Argentina with numerous pyramidal cities.
You said that the Lizardmen were also in the Southlands, is that right?
Yes, back when the world was still formed as one large continent, when the Slan built their kind of empire, there was a Slan who rides on the back of a stegodon, of effectively a triceratops in our own world, called Mazdamundi. And what he did is he tore apart the continents. So the bit of the Southlands, again, mirroring our own geography, the Southlands or Africa would join up with the bottom of Lustria, which would be South America in our world. So that's how that got over there.
Gotcha.
But he also, quite famously, did what I like to call doing a Moses and created a dry path between Lustria and the Southlands to come to the aid of a group that were being attacked.
That's not a constant dry run that he just summoned and parted the water, as it were, when it was needed.
Yeah.
It's not like the Channel Tunnel. It's not permanent.
No, the Channel
Okay,
Tunnel. Got it. So the continent of Lustria is just thick with these pyramidal cities, the first of which was called Itza, I-T-Z-A. There are hundreds of these cities dotted around Lustria, all on significant points on ley lines, and I think to describe one of these cities would be to describe all of them. If you can imagine a thick jungle canopy with these enormous stepped pyramids of various sizes coming out of the undergrowth. And atop each one is either a shrine to an old one or like a floating crystal or a floating stone that feeds into the kind of geomantic energy that keeps the communication between the Slan going across the entire continent. Effectively, a phone line of magic.
That's amazing.
In the grounds of each of these huge pyramids, you have marshalling grounds where the armies would gather, but then more importantly, you have the spawning grounds where the next generation of lizardmen are created, of the lizardmen races. The most frequent spawnings are the skinks, who are the kind of small, effectively a lizardy halfling. And
you say skinks, aren't skinks amphibious? So do they spawn and become like tadpoles and newts? Or are they eggs? Do they come out of eggs? Or
yes, well, they would come out of eggs anyway, but I think it's a spawn rather than an individual laying of eggs. But these spawns are sponsored by either a Slan or an old one, or the spirit or memory of an old one, according to the great plan. If you recall, before the old ones fucked off when Chaos turned up, they wrote down, here's what would have happened, on the great golden plaques that adorn most of these temples. And so spawnings happen at times that have been foretold by the old ones and sponsored by that individual old one. And it's the coloration of these skinks, and in fact, it's the coloration of any lizard man that tells you which god spawned them. The most impressive being the albino spawnings, which are sponsored by all of the old ones, if memory serves. And these are the ones that become the prophets and the priests that serve the Slan.
okay, all right, sponsored by. That's an interesting term. This spawning was sponsored by Pepsi.
You've been watching.
And now a word from our sponsors.
So the great mountain range that runs down the west coast of the continent of Lustria is called the Spine of Sotek. And if you recall, Sotek is the serpent god, the most popular old one of the Lizardmen, and the arch nemesis of all Skaven everywhere.
That son of a bitch.
Ben no likey.
He's so mean. Hiss. And really then, that's it. That's the end of a quick journey around the Warhammer world outside of the old world.
Shit. That was amazing.
That is fascinating. I've got to say that the story of Ulthuan and the separation of the High Elf and the Dark Elf society, I think that was the most absorbing story. I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Going back east to near Morn, the mountains of Morn, and the roads, the trading passes and roads that we are paralleled with, like the Silk Road and the Spice Road.
Yes, through the mountains of Morn and the Darklands, yeah.
What kind of merchant, human merchant, in their right mind would want to go through this huge land which could swallow the old world on its own? You know, they've got to be paid a pretty penny for that, you know. And are they protected? And, you know, they're going to be under assault all the time by everyone there. Yeah, what kind of mad merchant have you got to be to do that job?
You've got to be perhaps not avaricious, but ambitious. Because a single caravan successfully makes it through, you only ever need to do it once. You can write your own ticket in the old world after that. You can buy a castle.
Right, okay.
Because you've not only got to get across the entire Darklands and then through the Mountains of Morn, but you've then also got to come all the way back with all of that gold.
Yeah.
Fuck me. That is a
Or
challenge.
you just take your money and just set up over in the Far East instead, where it's always warm and the food's delicious.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so it's kind of like every merchant's peak in their career. It's like, if you can make it over there and sell, you're set for life. And only a handful of people, I guess, have ever done that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really like the story of the Land of the Dead. I like that there's just an apocalyptic event, which is still the state of play. You know, it's
a loose end. It's not been.
Yeah.
There's been no closure on it.
It's unresolved. There's one guy fucked an entire country, and just that was it. They're all dead. Like, I imagine there would just be, you know, entire cityscapes that are still in the state they were when everyone was killed.
Yeah.
Except the only thing that's changed is that all of those people that killed are still walking around, undead.
If I'm recalling correctly, the whole thing happened in an afternoon, or at the very least in a 24-hour period.
Yeah, that's just
So
fascinating.
it was a thriving, bustling nation. And then within 24 hours, it was brains.
Yeah. It was instantly a land of skeletons. I think all the flesh was just magically boiled off.
That is...
Yep.
And so the last surviving member of the Nehekaran race was this Alcadizar, was the guy who Nagash had captured. And in fact, Nagash had captured him because he had led part of the rebellion to get rid of him. And so he wanted to show him what happens to people who rebel. So he was going to destroy his whole kingdom.
That's what you get. That's what you get.
Yo. So Dhar, that's the geography, right? So we've got a pretty good idea of where everything lies now. Where do we go from here? What's the next step?
I think really that's up to you guys. What I would suggest is we take each civilization / kingdom and do a bit of a deep dive into it and spend a couple of episodes exploring what it looks like, going into a bit more depth than we've done so far, having a look at concepts about where these things fit together. I remember in episode 1, we went from the populating of the world to when the vortex was successfully constructed. So we would look at events from that time forward for individual races and groups or kingdoms. So really, what kind of kingdoms would you guys be interested in having a look at?
I would like to give the Skaven some love, actually.
Oh, Chris, you just say the nicest things. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say I would like to hear a little bit more about the Orcs. even though it's not true.
Yeah, let's go the Orcs then. Yeah, Ben said it. Go on, Orcs. Go. Reverse psychology, baby.
You
In
bastard.
action.
Alrighty, that's all from us. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to find out more about the topics we discussed in this podcast, you can find all the reference articles in the show notes. And we'll be back again next month displaying just how little Chris and I know. Until then, ta-ta.
See ya.
Toodaloo.